It started with her voice, calm, deliberate, the kind that made silence feel like it was listening. She said, "You'll never understand." But the way she looked at me said otherwise. Her eyes weren't warning me, they were testing me. The kind of look that holds the edge of something fragile, like a truth you're not supposed to touch, but already have. The evening was soft, dim, the kind that folds itself around you. The air carried the smell of rain on old pavement. I was leaning against the counter, pretending to read something that didn't matter, when she walked in. 40, maybe 41. Grace without trying. The kind of beauty that time doesn't erase, it just hides it in subtler places. The way she adjusted her sleeve, the way her hair fell to one side, how her smile never reached her eyes but still made you hold your breath. She stopped near me, close enough that I could feel the shift in the air, a mix of her perfume and the warmth of her skin. "You think too much," she said. "Maybe," I answered. "But it's hard not to when you're around." She didn't smile, but her hand brushed the counter, inches from mine. A quiet gesture that felt louder than words. "I'm not what you think I am," she whispered, turning slightly away. And still, I found myself staring. Not at her face, but at the way her shoulders rose when she exhaled. The faint tremor in her hand when she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The tiny, human imperfections that made her more real, and somehow, more dangerous. "Maybe not," I said. "But I like who you are when you forget to pretend." That made her stop. She didn't move, didn't turn, just stood there, a small pause before the world started again. She finally turned her head, her eyes meeting mine. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because you don't know what they mean." Her tone was gentle, but her voice carried the weight of history, like she'd lived 100 stories that ended the same way. Someone too young, too honest, too hopeful. The rain outside began again, soft at first, then steadier. She moved toward the window, watching the drops blur the city lights. I followed, not too close, but close enough that I could see her reflection beside mine. She looked smaller in the glass, softer. Vulnerable in a way she'd never admit. "You'll never understand," she said again, quieter this time. I should have left it there. But something in her voice, the exhaustion, the edge of longing, made me step closer. Maybe it was the way her breathing changed. Maybe it was the silence that fell, heavy and full. But suddenly, we were standing too close, the kind of distance where one breath could rewrite everything. Her hand rested on the window frame, mine hovered beside it. The space between our fingers pulsed like a heartbeat. "Then explain it to me," I said. She turned, slow, her face inches from mine. The light from the street caught the curve of her cheek, the shimmer in her eyes. "I can't," she said. "And if I tried, you'd never see me the same again." My pulse caught. The rain outside grew louder. She held my gaze, a moment stretched thin between sense and surrender. And just as I thought she'd say more, just as I felt the pull of something neither of us could name, the door creaked open behind us. A voice called her name. She stepped back. And in that instant, I understood, not everything, but enough to know I was already in too deep. The next day, everything should have gone back to normal. It didn't. I saw her again, same calm face, same steady voice, but something had changed. Or maybe I had. The air between us felt heavier, like the silence remembered what we almost said. She was standing by the window again, sorting through some papers, her sleeves rolled up just enough to show the small scar on her wrist. I'd never noticed it before. It looked like something old, healed, but not forgotten, a story she'd never tell. "Rough night?" I asked. She didn't look at me. "You could say that." There was a pause, the kind that wasn't empty, but full of things neither of us were brave enough to say. I leaned against the counter, pretending not to study her. But every detail pulled me in, the way her hair brushed her collarbone, the faint tiredness in her eyes, the trace of lipstick smudged at the edge of her mouth. "You ever regret something?" she asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. "Every day." Her eyes flicked toward me, curious. "You're too young for that." I don't think regret waits for age. She almost smiled, almost. Then she went quiet again, staring out the window. I used to be married, she said finally. 10 years ago. He left. Said I made him feel small? I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. I just listened. After that, she continued softly, I decided it's easier to be alone. People expect less when you stop letting them close. Her voice trembled just slightly, a sound so human it hurt to hear. I wanted to reach for her hand. I didn't. Instead, I said, maybe some people aren't meant to stay out. That made her turn. Her gaze held mine longer than it should have. You don't know what you're saying, she whispered. Maybe not, I said. But I meant it. She stepped closer slowly, until I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Her perfume was faint, something soft, clean, familiar. She rested her hand on my shoulder, just for a second. It was enough to stop my breath. You should be careful with words like that, she said. I'm careful. You're the one who keeps standing this close. Her hand froze, then withdrew, leaving a ghost of warmth behind. The air between us trembled. She took a slow breath, her voice quieter now. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Maybe it was never supposed to be easy. We stood there, still, close, everything unsaid hanging between us. Then she looked down, her lips parting as if to say something more, but she didn't. Instead, her fingers brushed against mine, barely, like a question she didn't want answered. Neither of us moved. The next few days blurred into something dangerous, quiet, deliberate, impossible to undo. Every time we were in the same room, it felt like the walls noticed. The air thickened. Words came slower, softer. A single look lasted too long. It happened one afternoon, sunlight spilling through the blinds, cutting her face into light and shadow. She was standing close, too close, showing me something on her phone. I don't even remember what it was, a message, maybe, but her shoulder brushed mine, and everything else disappeared. Her voice dropped unconsciously. You're not listening. I am, I said. Then tell me what I just said. I couldn't. All I could hear was the quiet rhythm of her breathing, steady, deliberate, dangerous. Her eyes flicked up, catching mine. She knew. She always did. And then, the faint sound of a door unlocking down the hall. She flinched back instantly, almost stumbling. I stepped away too fast, knocking into a chair. Her phone hit the floor, screen down. A coworker's voice echoed from the hallway, casual, unaware. Hey, you in there? She mouthed, don't say a word. My pulse was a hammer. I bent to pick up her phone, handing it to her, fingers brushing again. A static spark. She didn't pull away this time. The door opened, just an inch, and then shut again. The voice faded down the hall. We both exhaled. Her hand was still in mine. Someone could have seen, she whispered, more to herself than to me. But they didn't. That's not the point. Then what is? She hesitated. Her gaze darted to our joined hands, still touching, still unwilling to let go. This, she said quietly. This is the problem. I wanted to say she was wrong. That nothing about this felt like a problem, it felt inevitable. But her voice shook slightly, and I knew she wasn't just afraid of being seen. She was afraid of herself. When I didn't answer, she stepped back, folding her arms as if to build a wall she didn't want. People talk, she said. You're young. I'm not. So what? So it's not supposed to look like this. Her voice cracked on the last word. I moved closer, slow, careful. Then maybe it doesn't have to look like anything. She looked up sharply, eyes wet but fierce. You don't know what you're asking for. I almost said I do. But something in her expression, the trembling edge between fear and want, made me stop. We were standing inches apart now, the sunlight falling between us like a thin golden barrier. I could see her lips part, just slightly, and for a second, I thought she'd closed the distance. But then her phone buzzed. A text. Loud, intrusive, wrong. She stepped back, clutching it like a shield. I should go, she whispered. Should you? She didn't answer, just stood there, torn between leaving and staying. Then she turned to the door, pausing long enough to glance back. And in that moment, the silence, the half-step, the look, I realized something cruelly certain. We weren't avoiding the fall anymore. We were already in it. It was raining that evening, the kind that didn't pour, just whispered against the windows like it was trying to be forgotten. She'd called, said she needed to drop something off. It wasn't true. We both knew that. When she walked in, her hair was damp, clinging to her cheeks. Her coat hung loosely from her shoulders, and her eyes, they looked tired, but not from the rain. You shouldn't have come, I said. She ignored it, setting a file on the table that neither of us cared about. I didn't have time to wait till morning. Her hands were trembling. Small, almost invisible, but I saw it. I always noticed the small things. You could have just called. She laughed, soft, bitter. And said what? The silence after that was thick enough to breathe in. Then she sighed and sat down, running her fingers through her hair, pushing a wet strand behind her ear. You think this is easy for me? I stepped closer without thinking. I think you're pretending it's harder than it is. Her head snapped up. Don't. The word wasn't angry, it was scared. She looked at me like someone standing too close to the edge, afraid of what the wind might do. Then tell me why you're here, I said quietly. She didn't move. Didn't answer. Just stared at the floor like the truth might be hiding there. When I reached out, brushing her hair back from her face, she closed her eyes. Just for a second. Don't do that, she whispered. Why not? Because I'll let you. The air between us shifted. Heavy. Electric. I could feel her heartbeat even from inches away. Or maybe it was mine. She stood suddenly, too fast, her chair scraping the floor. This? She started, but her voice broke. This isn't right. Then stop me. She didn't. I took a step closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth rising off her skin. Her breath caught when I lifted my hand, my fingers hovering just shy of her jaw. Her eyes met mine, not soft this time, but desperate. You think I don't want this? She said, voice shaking. You think I haven't? She stopped herself, pressing her lips together like the words themselves were dangerous. I swallowed. Then why keep running? Because if I don't, she whispered, I'll lose myself in you. And then, the smallest, most reckless thing, she leaned forward, just enough for her forehead to rest against mine. No kiss. No words. Just the sound of rain and breath and everything we'd been trying to hold back. I felt her hand rise, slow, uncertain, until her fingers touched my neck. The world narrowed to that single point of contact. She opened her mouth, maybe to say my name, maybe to tell me to stop, but the knock on the door came first. Sharp. Sudden. Final. We froze. Neither of us moved, not even to breathe. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, everything we'd been holding back finally had nowhere left to go. The knock still echoed in my head long after the door had closed again. It wasn't for her, it never was, but it broke something open that couldn't be fixed. She'd left in silence that night. No goodbye. No explanation. Just the faint smell of rain and her perfume clinging to the room. 2 days passed before I saw her again. She stood by the window in her office when I walked in, calm, distant, like nothing had ever happened. The sunlight hit her face just right, but her eyes avoided mine. You didn't answer my messages, I said. I didn't think there was anything left to say. That's not true. She turned then, slowly, her expression unreadable. Isn't it? Something was wrong. I could feel it. The air felt colder than it should have been. What happened? I asked. She hesitated, a small flicker, barely a second, then said, Someone saw us that night. My stomach dropped. Who? She didn't answer. Just crossed her arms, like holding herself together was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. Tell me. She exhaled, her voice soft. My sister. I took a step forward. Does she know? She knows enough. The silence that followed was sharp, filled with things neither of us dared to say. Then she laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. Do you know what she said to me? She said I looked happy. As if that's something I should be ashamed of. Her voice cracked at the end, and for a moment, all that strength she carried shattered. I wanted to reach for her, to touch her arm, to tell her none of it mattered, but she stepped back. Don't. You're pushing me away because someone saw us? No, she whispered, eyes locked on mine. Because it made me realize how easily I could lose everything. She walked past me then, brushing against my shoulder, just a small touch, but it burned like a confession. Do you regret it? I asked quietly. She froze. Her hand was still on the doorknob. Her voice came out barely above a breath. No. I regret wanting it. When she turned, there were tears in her eyes she didn't bother to hide. You think this is about age, or what people might say, but it's more than that. I told myself I was done feeling this way, that part of me was over. I moved closer. And now? Her lips trembled. Now I can't stop. The distance between us vanished, not closed, but charged, dangerous. Her hand lifted as if to touch my face, then fell halfway, curling into a fist instead. You don't understand what this could do to me. I shook my head slowly. You're wrong. About what? I understand perfectly. The words hung there, quiet, final, and yet they didn't end anything. She didn't move, didn't speak. Just stared, breathing unevenly, like the world had tilted under her feet. Then, finally, she said it, the line that would change everything. Then don't make me choose between what's right and you. And before I could answer, she opened the door and walked out, leaving me standing there, the sound of her footsteps fading, the decision we both feared now hanging in the air, waiting to be made. The rain had started again. Not the quiet kind, the kind that hits glass hard enough to sound like confession. I didn't plan to see her that night. I told myself I'd just walk by, maybe glance at the light under her door, and keep going. But when I saw the faint glow still on past midnight, something in me gave up pretending. The door was half open. She was sitting on the floor, barefoot, her hair loose, a glass of wine beside her she hadn't touched. The stormlight made her look unreal, like a memory still deciding if it wanted to exist. She looked up when I stepped inside. No words. Just a flicker of surprise, and then the quiet that always felt like home. You shouldn't be here, she said softly. I know. And yet, I couldn't stay away. The sentence hung between us, heavy with everything we'd avoided saying for weeks. She sighed, leaning her head back against the wall. You don't make this easy. I don't think it's supposed to be easy. For a long time, neither of us moved. The rain filled the silence, steady and unrelenting. Then she whispered, almost to herself. Do you have any idea what it's like, to want something you promised yourself you wouldn't? I did. But I couldn't say it out loud. So instead I crossed the room, slow, careful, until I was standing right in front of her. The air shifted. She didn't look up at first, just traced the rim of her glass with one finger. Then, finally, her gaze met mine. This is the moment, she said quietly, where we decide whether to ruin everything or walk away. Her words trembled, but her eyes didn't. I knelt down beside her. Maybe it's not ruin. Maybe it's what we were avoiding all along. Her breath caught, just barely audible. Don't say that, she murmured. You'll make me believe it. Her hand brushed against mine, not a deliberate touch, more like gravity deciding for us. Her skin was warm, trembling slightly, and that tiny contact sent something through me that felt dangerously close to peace. We were so close now that every exhale tangled with the others. Her perfume mixed with the smell of rain and wine, something tender and raw all at once. If we do this, she whispered, there's no going back. I leaned closer. There's nothing left to go back to. Her eyes searched mine, desperate, afraid, wanting. And then, she smiled, the kind of small, breaking smile that carries both surrender and regret. You really do understand, don't you? I do. That was it. No more distance. No more hesitation. Just the silent agreement that had always been there, waiting. The world outside blurred into sound, rain, thunder, heartbeats, all fading into the background as everything unspoken finally made sense. When she finally spoke again, her voice was soft, steady. Then don't let go. And I didn't. Not because it was right, or even smart, but because, in that single, impossible moment, we both knew the truth. Understanding her meant losing the part of me that didn't. Morning came too gently. The storm had passed, but its echoes stayed, a faint hum in the walls, a damp chill in the air, and the quiet weight of everything that had just changed. She was sitting by the window when I woke, her legs tucked under her, hair still damp from the rain. The light was soft, golden, the kind that made everything look forgiven. For a while, I didn't say anything. I just watched her, the curve of her shoulder, the slow rhythm of her breath, the way her fingers toyed with the edge of her coffee cup like she was trying to memorize the moment. She didn't turn when she spoke. Do you regret it? The question hit quiet, like most of hers did, the kind that wasn't really asking for an answer. I got up, crossed the room, and sat beside her. No, I said. Do you? Her lips curved just slightly. I should. But you don't. She finally looked at me. No. Not yet. Outside, the world had gone back to its ordinary rhythm, cars passing, wind against the trees, someone's dog barking 2 houses down. It almost felt unfair, how normal everything looked when nothing inside us was. She rested her head against my shoulder, just barely. I've spent years building walls that made sense, she murmured. And then you came along, and none of it did anymore. I smiled, not the confident kind, just the honest one. Maybe some things aren't supposed to make sense. She laughed softly, shaking her head. You sound too young to believe that. Maybe, I said. Or maybe that's the only reason I can. The silence that followed wasn't awkward this time. It was full, of air, of warmth, of something real. My hand found hers almost without thought. Her fingers were cool at first, then tightened around mine slowly, as if learning how to stay. There was no speech, no promise, no dramatic confession. Just that small, quiet closeness. 2 people who had already said everything that needed saying without words. She turned slightly, her forehead brushing my jaw. This won't be easy, she whispered. I know. And we'll both get blamed for it. Probably. And still? I nodded. Still. For the first time, she didn't argue. She just leaned into me, the softest kind of surrender. The kind that didn't need permission or explanation. We sat there for a long time, watching the sunlight dry the last drops on the window. The world felt bigger, but somehow safer, too. Eventually, she said, almost to herself, You really did understand, didn't you? I looked at her, this woman who had taught me what silence could mean, what distance could hide, what wanting could destroy and heal at the same time. I did, I said quietly. With every breath between us. Her smile was small, tired, beautiful. The kind that said everything without trying to fix anything. We stayed like that, fingers intertwined, hearts unguarded, while the day unfolded slowly around us. And for once, it didn't feel like the end of something. It felt like the beginning of everything that finally made sense.